Look, there is not a gap in sight. Welcome to the Humboldt Axe YouTube channel. I'm Doc, and this time I'm going to show you how to prepare your wedge before you hang your heads, at least how I do it. I've been doing this for a number of years, and I don't like to bust up my wedges, and I make sure they got a good tight fit. So also, if you could please support us by subscribing down below. We were looking at our channel, and it's like 99% of the people that watch our channel haven't subscribed yet. So we'd greatly appreciate it if you could help support us by subscribing. And with that, stay tuned, hang with me, and let's go get to it. So I'm in the middle of an axe build for my friend's brand and for his business. So I'm getting ready to hang the head, and I thought what I'd do is take you through how I prepare my wedges, at least the techniques that I've learned over the years. And it's just the way I do it. There's all sorts of ways to do this, but I'll show you. So first of all, let me put this camera down so I don't look like a complete dork. Kind of a dork, but not complete. Let me grab a wedge out of my wedge collection, and I'll show you what we're working with. All right. I keep all my wedges up here. I got a fan that constantly blows in my shed here, just because it's so humid at Humboldt. Got to keep the air moving, but here. I think what I'm going to do this time is I've got some walnut wedges, and this is for a double bit axe. Preparing a wedge for a single bit's really the same thing, but this is my walnut wedge here. But I want to make sure it's going to fit proper, and it's a little bit shorter than this other one. I get all my Adirondack handles, and he sends me a bunch of wedges with them, and they usually work really great, but it just depends how big the head is. The double bit that I'm using right now is just under 5 pounds. It's a big old sucker, and it's thick, but it's, you know, pretty wide and long. So that's it. I'm going to go back to my shop and get this thing prepared. I don't put steel wedges in my axes. I used to when I made them, but depends what I'm doing with them. My splitting axe, which is a double bit, a big old double bit, I've showed it on the channel before. I split all my wood with that. So I don't make them proud. I cut the top of it off when I hafted it, and I drove a couple steel wedges down in there. And I'll explain a little bit more, but when you make your axes proud where the handle sticks out, I mean, there is a little bit where you can grab it, so it depends on what you're using it for. But when you bang that wedge in there, it actually pushes that wood at the top that hangs out the top of your axe out and helps secure it. So anyway, I don't wedge mine, I leave them proud. But if I do take them down to the bit, I usually put a steel wedge in there. So anyway, let's go back out to my shop and show you how I prepare these things. All right, this is the axe I'm currently working on. Oh, man, this thing is cool. It's a big old bit. Oh, there you are. And it's just under 5 pounds, but it's an old falling bit is what it is. And I wrap them up. This is a display axe, and I use expanding glue. Makes a mess, so I try to protect the finish on this. And then here's the handle. It actually is I don't know if you can tell, but I didn't want to make it completely black, so it's a really dark ebony. Man, this thing looks cool. So that video's coming out, but let me show you how I prepare the kerf, the wedge, and all the rest of it. How I set this thing. Seems pretty basic, but I at least want to walk through a little more in detail. I've posted a bunch of videos on how I do this, but never really talked to the details. So let's do that. There's actually, well, this is just how I do it. You know, there's lots of different ways to change a wheel bearing, as my stepdad used to say. So what I try to do is, first of all, see how wide my wedge is, and actually look at that. So I'm going to use the walnut wedge. I can just tell you that straight out. That's perfect. These other ones, if you've got to take your wedge down, I usually just kind of start out and I'll mark it with a pen down here, and I've got a belt sander, and I'll shorten it up. And I also round off these edges as well. So that's really important. And then the other thing I'll do is I got to take down my kerf, but I usually, right before I go to set it, I'll find out how far down I got to go. here's what I usually do is either, there's a way to mark them 2/3 down the head. I use a hacksaw and I'll mark this. It's about right there, I would say. If you can see that, I'll mark it and then I'll line it up and see what I'm working with on the kerf here. I'm going to open it up. So it's already going to be 2/3 down, but I want to use as much of that wedge as I possibly can. So I'm going to lower that kerf down to probably, I don't know if you can see that too well, about where the end of my thumb is. Oop. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'm on a bad angle. So I'm going to take that kerf down about 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to round this thing off. I'm going to set the head and I'll look in there to see what kind of gap I'm looking at. You want to fill the kerf up, but I want to see how much is on the outside, and then you gauge the width of your kerf based on what you're eyeballing. You don't want to go the same because it'll force this wood out and press it up against the, of course, the bit too. So let me take this kerf down. Not much, a little bit. This one's going to be, I don't want to say easy because, you know, they never are, and I want to not jinx myself. Okay, let me see if I can bring you in a little bit further. Maybe like that. So, well, the first thing is when I fire burn these handles, normally it raises that kerf, or it expands the kerf. I didn't overburn this one. I just wanted to bring the grain out because I knew I was going to ebony it. Put the ebony, the dark dye on there, but you want to make sure just because when I go to fitting on it, I try to use I don't use a metal hammer usually, but inevitably I kind of smash the top of this kerf closed, and I want to open that up. I need to put some gloves on. There we go. Something like that. Okay, let me put some gloves on. Just because I should. I've cut my finger so many times that I should know better. So I'm going to mark this thing so I know how deep it is. Or here, I'll just use this. It's just a hacksaw blade to gauge the depth I want to go. So all I do, I mean, seems pretty basic, but whatever. I'll show you what's up. I kind of just mark it, the depth of my wedge. Stick it down in there, and hopefully you can see that. It's about 1/4 of an inch. You don't have to go all the way down because I'm going to bury this wedge in there. And it's the other reason I use expanding glue. There's pros and cons to doing expanding glue. So the pros are, number one, it expands out, and so all my bits that I hang are all vintage bits, and they're all imperfect. They all been banged on. They live their life, you know. And I don't want any gaps when I go to set. When I go to hang. And that expanding glue will expand in there and it'll fill up every single gap that's inside this, even down in the kerf, down at the bottom. So there's no gap. I don't want any moisture in my heads. I live in Humboldt, so it's humid. The handles will eventually dry out, but around here, it's going to take a long time. It's the other reason why I use poly as well. Because it's so humid, because we live by the coast, there's so much moisture here that it takes a lot longer for these handles actually to dry out than if you're in a drier climate. And then the other thing that expanding glue will do is it just helps get a little bit more tight fit when you go to set your head. You know, when you bang it on there and you get that wedge all prepped in there and you hammer that thing down in there, it actually creates even more of a tighter fit. The cons to using this stuff is it's extremely messy. I usually use way too much just because I want to make sure, because when these things leave my hands, you way more likely break the handle long before the head will ever come out. So the other con to this is you could probably reuse the handle, but man, to cut that wedge out of there and reset, you're better off using wood glue. Again, it depends on what you're using them for, what you do, where you're at, what your techniques are, but these are my reasons on why I use that expanding glue. It's tough as nails as well, and I want to make sure they're fit. And the axes that I've been doing lately are all displays for the most part, but even the users, I'll use that expanding glue, and I'll go get it in a minute. I'm warming it up. It's got to be warm. It's like 50 degrees right now, which is nice, but it's not good for the glue. So that's the reason. There's some pros and cons to using expanding glue versus wood glue. Wood glue works absolutely great, and it works really nice. And the advantage to wood glue is it's a lot easier to work with. It's far less messier. It gets a really good bond, obviously because it's wood glue. And if you ever wanted to reuse your handle, way easier to reuse your handles when you use wood glue. Way easier. So again, it depends what you're going to do. So let me go get my glue. I'm not talking about it, and I'll show you the glue that I use for when I bang these in. When I go to put my strike guards on, I use the same brand of glue, but it's the clear rubberized. So let me go get it, and then I'll prepare this thing, and I'll take this down and go through the process of setting the head on here. This is the glue I use. I mean, I'm sure you're all familiar with this stuff, but it expands, it says like 3 times or something. Works really good. It's water resistant and all that, but if anybody's worked with this, you know how messy it is. So, all right, let's get this kerf set. And the other thing I find is with the heads or the handles that I use, the kerf is usually off at an angle like so, and I don't want to take too much. So this handle's really prepared quite nice, and my wedge just about fits nice in it. So let's get this done. And I just use a hacksaw. I don't like taking as little wood as I possibly can. That's why I use a hacksaw. But, you know, doesn't take much either. The other thing you want to be careful of when you're fixing your kerf, don't let your blade go off, because you'll cut this kerf right off and you'll ruin your handle. I haven't done that yet, but you really got to pay attention to your line going down on this. Okay, let's check our depth. So I'm there. I didn't have to take too much. So now what I'll do is I'll prepare. I'm gonna get the head set, and I'm gonna see how much gap I'm working with, and then I'm gonna fit this wedge to the handle. I don't just go banging in wedges like this. You really should take a little bit of time. Again, this is what I do, so you can do whatever you want, but I take a lot of time making sure that the thickness up here matches whatever gaps I'm having, but not the same, but a little bit larger, because it'll push the wood out, and then I'll round this thing off. So let me show you how I do that. But let me get this head set on there first. All right. Normally, let's get something here. I try to protect my handles when I do this. I just put saran wrap around my handle, you know, and then I cover it with tape, just because it's custom axe, and you'll see it in another video. It's coming out. And then the bottom of this, so when I grip my handles, I round them off. If you leave the edge on them, and I've done it before, you'll crack them when you go to bang on them. So the other thing I have is a couple pieces of it's just paper towel. Fold it all up to give it a little bit of cushion, just to protect your handles. You know, you got to go banging on them. Okay, let's see what we're working with. I marked my bits. The other thing too is a lot of the heads that I have, and I think I talked about this in one of my other. Let's go up a little bit. Is some of these old vintage bits, one bit is longer than the other. And I talked about that regarding the Adirondack handles, and I explained that piece of it. And this is an old falling bit, so it is. So I had to mark it. I marked the front, so I know which way is facing forward, because this bit on this side's longer than this one. So it's always good to keep track of this. And then the other thing too is, because all my heads are old, I mean, this one's really old. At least 80 years, at least, maybe older than that. But they're imperfect, the eyes. So when you go to setting it on there, you want to keep track of taking it on and putting off on the same, on the same side, because if you happen to flip it, it probably would still fit. But I obsess over getting a perfect fit on my handle. It's why I use a draw knife. Takes a lot longer. And the other thing you want to make sure you do before you do this is, I've got a little round file, an older one that I've used to sharpen my chains with on my power saw. I try to round the inside of these eyes off. This one was fine, but some of them have a hard, they have a really tough edge. I just want a good compression fit. So anyway, let's get this head set so we know what we're working with. Now this is an Adirondack handle, so it's curved and it faces, so this is the front. If you do a straight handle, you still want to pay attention to how you're putting your head on, even a reversible, again, because the eyes are imperfect. So let me get this on there. Yeah. Man, that thing fits good. So I'm going to leave this one proud, so I'm not putting a wedge in it. Again, this is a display axe too, so and you can kind of, well, you usually can eyeball and you can see which bit's longer than the other. If you're not sure, look down on it, and if you're really not sure, just get a tape measure out, Okay, let's get this thing set. Get my condenser. Give it a few whacks. Man, this thing fit really good. It's not, I don't have any curling, little slight bit. And I had to take it way down on the hand, onto the shoulder, because this thing is so tall. Normally I have a lot more that sticks out here, and that's just enough, because I'll cut it. But man, this thing came out nice. I'm going to give it another couple whacks for insurance. Oh, I felt it. You'll feel it too. Look at that. Man, okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about on gap, how to eyeball your, I've been doing all this by eye. I've done so many of them. And I'll show you how I've kind of gauged the thickness of the wedge when I go to stick it in there. I look at the gap on the top, well, on this side and on this side. I have a little bit of a gap. And then I try to look at what kind of kerf I'm working with. So I need to make this a little less, you do want the top to be thick. What'll happen is when you bang this wedge in here, this top wood right here, it'll spread over, and that's what you want. The wedge, this thing ain't going nowhere, but if you can get this top wood right here on this side, what it'll do when that wedge gets in there is it'll spread that wood out, and that handle ain't coming out of there. Plus you've got it all in there and compact. So I usually try to look at my gaps. I'll look at how much kerf I've got in there, and then I'll gauge this thing. And I always go about, what I estimate on my gaps when I look at that is probably 2 times. This one isn't too bad, but I definitely want to smash this wedge down there as far as I can get. And even if it doesn't, even if I wind up with, a little bit at the top, it's still okay, because again, it ain't going anywhere. And that expanding glue, if I've got any at the bottom of this, say, I don't know if you can see this, but if I leave any gap down here where the kerf, where I opened it up, and this wedge don't make it all the way down there, that expanding glue will fill up all those voids. And it really works great. So let me get this wedge prepped, and I'll tell you what I use. I love this thing. I almost got rid of it when I bought my 2-inch, but it's just a little a 1x30 belt and belt sander, and I got 80 grit on here. So the other thing I'm going to do is on this, I round these edges off. It just makes the wedge go in there a lot tighter and a lot better fit. I don't leave these corners. You can. It depends on what you're doing. Again, this is just what I do. But I want this wedge going in there is completely and hopefully unbroken. But if it does split, it happens all the time where I'll have my wedge split down the middle. It's not going to hurt anything. And actually, you can kind of get them down in there, kind of like using wedge when you fall a tree and you kind of work them both in there. There's an advantage to when you split them as well. And again, with expanding glue, it doesn't matter. But my goal is to try to get it in there nice, tight, have it go right down in there and bang it so it's even. But let me get this thing prepped. There you go. I should be good to go. We're about to find out. So let's get this thing hung. I'm going to take this glue and I'm going to drizzle it down in there to get it down in there. Once I stick the wedge in, it'll help push that glue all the way down in there as well. And yeah, I'm wearing these because this stuff's nasty. And then I cover up or I'll smear some all over my wedge as well. But I just want to make sure that glue goes all the way down into the bottom of that kerf. It's just insurance, because I've had wedges stick out a little bit and and there's about a 1/4 inch, not normally, but sometimes that happens where I'll maybe leave this a little too thick. And but this is insurance against that. So let me get some glue down in there. And this stuff is, man, it works great. I love it. And if you do it right, you can get you a good drip. There it goes. And I just kind of get a small little stream. Look at that. It goes right down in there. Got this thing set in there. I got enough down in there to make it all the way down. So make sure we're good before I go to convince it to go all the way down here. Come on. Okay. Oop. Already making a mess. No matter how much I try this stuff, man. That's why I protect all my handles. But there you go. That thing's ready to be hammered in there. It's going to go in nice. Of course, moment of truth is coming right now. So let me bang this thing in. Point of no return. It's going to work. So let's get it going. Oh yeah. All right. Man. There you go. We can see that in the light. Those walnut wedges look great. It's going to match the axe too. But again, this is just how I do it. Look, there is not a gap in sight. There's a little bit of glue that come out on this side. I don't know if you can see it. Hopefully you can. It pushes its way out, but the rest of that glue, and I put quite a bit in there, it's all on the inside, so it filled up all my little gaps in this axe. So that's why I use this glue. It's messy, but it works, man. So there you go. Well, thank you so much for watching. My family and I greatly appreciate it. Again, like 99% of the folks that watch our channel haven't quite subscribed yet. So if you could please help us out and we can grow the channel, if you could subscribe down below, we'd greatly appreciate it. And with that, just remember, celebrate others, respect yourself, because love is powerful, man. Thank you so much. I'll see you on the next one.